You guys can unmute yourselves. Can you unmute yourselves?
Hi.
Hi. And if you guys have faces, if you can start your video, if you're having a bad hair day, don't bother, but we'd love to see your faces. Hi. Hi, Mindy.
Hello, hi.
Shelly. Hi.
Let's
Hello.
see. I
Thank
was
you all
gonna
for being
see if I
here.
can change my name here so you guys can let's see.
That you can be little meadow foxes.
Well, I was gonna change it to Jennifer Stenhouse.
Is your name right?
Yes.
This is
Uh,
you guys. This is the introduction. This is Jennifer
rename. There it is. Oh,
Stenhouse, aka Little Meadow Foxes.
that's it.
So we have about, I don't know, 40 people who RSVP'd to this. And people don't always come for the thing, and then some people are busy taking care of families and making dinner and doing everything, and they'll come back later.
Right.
And I'm going to co-host this with Jen tonight. I'm Susan Walkler. I'm the, what do we call it, interim co-president and workshop coordinator for MAG. And we'll have a lot of people from MAG and a lot of people from far away. I'm really excited to have Jen tonight. Thank you for being here because she's going to teach us about Mitsuro wax. And I don't know if you all know about it, but it's all new to me and new enough that I'm passionate about learning it, but I haven't played with it yet. And I was the kid that used to get in trouble for stretching her bubble gum in class, and this is what that reminds me of. So that's my.
It is a little bit. It is. I
my
was gonna say I see a few familiar faces. Hi. Well,
so
Stephanie pop in and out. Hi, Stephanie.
I'm gonna let Jen tell you
Hi,
about
Jennifer.
Hey, how are you?
the
Let's
workshop coming up, and feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions, and then just mute yourself again. So if your dog's barking or you have noise in the background, it's not distracting. But feel free to ask questions.
I'm gonna be sipping here. I've got my tea, a little Earl Grey, ready to go. So there we go. Or as I like to call it, a London fog. I'm pretty happy about that. Well, hi everybody. It's me, Jennifer. um, yeah, so I'm real excited. We were just talking about getting down to Atlanta and working on some casting stuff, and which I love. It is my absolute pleasure and passion to be able to teach it and share it with you guys. And it's one of the reasons I was just telling her that I really enjoy teaching it so much is because there's uh I really like being able to empower people to be able to cast metal because it is so, so awesome. Um, I've been teaching for more than 3 decades with in different situations. Started the metals and jewelry department at Savannah College of Art and Design way back in the day, and have been teaching out here at North Seattle College and a number of other places. But I love teaching casting. That is what I do. I've even helped people set up casting studios like for Bainbridge Artist Resource Network and other places. But I love being able to take even a classroom full of teenagers and get them working with a torch, understanding what metal does when it's liquid and flowing into a mold and how that works and understanding like the nature of what casting's about and making you feel really confident about being able to cast your own stuff as well. And not just that, but to be able to, if you're working with a caster, be able to talk to them and understand what it is that you want and what your expectations are and what's possible and what's not possible. So I mean that's kind of where I come from when I'm working in casting, whether it's carving wax or sculpture wax or Mitsuru or whatever it is. And was just telling Susan I'm currently have been for the last couple of years working on a book that's the history of lost wax casting. So it's, one of the things I like to remind people is that, this has been done for more than 6,000 years. And a lot of the technical stuff that we use now has only been around for about the last 100 years. It's a lot of newer technology and stuff that we're using, especially recently with, even the digital and induction casting. But yeah, it's a very old, ancient way of moving atoms around. It's amazing. So, so the Mitsuru is almost 2,000 years old, but has been used all over the world in all kinds of different ways. And the Japanese have perfected this particular type of wax that is a combination of beeswax and pine resins, and it creates this very beautiful, sinewy texture that can be, pulled and played with, in terms of its own texture. But it's a great kind of sculpture wax as well. So it gives you lots and lots of opportunities to be able to sculpt and play and make all kinds of things with it. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. What kind of questions did you guys have? Did you want me to show you some of the stuff that we're going to be working with? Emily says yes. Okay. So, well, a couple of the things that are really important when you're working with Mitsuru, most people around the world have been making this from scratch. And so, whether it's a material that's being used for pitch, because pine resin, beeswax, and other stuff goes into pitch as well. There are all kinds of glues and people that do, oh gosh, um, camping and all kinds of other stuff, bushcrafting, have been using combinations of this kind of wax and resin for millennia, because it was handy. You could get sap out of the trees, and that stuff's sticky. And they were using honey and beeswax for a long time. And people that were working around ceramics were also employing these particular materials. So it's the materials are really basic. And I certainly don't own the recipe, nor does anybody, on Mitsuro Hikime, but it is this particular recipe is has a Japanese origin, and it's a really good one. What I usually do with mine, and I've worked with it for quite a long time, and I wanted to make sure that the beeswax that I'm using for mine is locally sourced from. It's actually up in Snohomish, so I have an apiary or bee producing place up in the Snohomish Valley that's just beautiful. And they do beehives, and there's a whole bunch of people in the area that they help service that are other um, apiaries and like young kids coming in and have their own beehives and trying to protect the environment. It's awesome. I just love them. So I go up there and get my beeswax from them, and I have found that other beeswaxes, if you order it like from Amazon or someplace like that, it it works. Sometimes it smells kind of weird. It doesn't smell like really good beeswax. This stuff smells like honey. It's amazing. So, smell. It is
Scratch and snips, right?
good. Yeah, scratch and stiff that. There you go. It's right up there. Um, but I usually buy, a whole bunch of blocks of this. This is a pound of beeswax, but it's just, oh my God, it smells so good. And I know you guys have, apiaries down there. My sister and I went scouting some of them out last time I was there. She lives in Marietta. So the beeswax, I really like using local sources. And the other ingredient that's in this is pine resin. And there's quite a wide variety of pine resins because there's quite a variety of pine. One of the really good pine resins, as you all are probably aware of the pines that are there in Georgia. Like me, I grew up with them everywhere, and the pines down there produce a really good resin. So a lot of the resins come from there that are used for the music industry and making rosin for bows and things. So some of the stuff I use is from there, but one of the things that I found while I was doing some research was that the ponderosa pine, my neighbor that lives behind me, has this incredible, like 200-year-old ponderosa pine. And I was like, I wonder if I could, Rachel, can I steal some of this sticky stuff off your tree And she was like, "Oh, please." So I borrowed some of her, scooped up some of her resin, and brought it back and processed it. And one of the things I was really surprised by, because I was very used to, Georgia pine, and it smells like, pine sol, um, is that ponderosa pine, and this is raw pine pitch right out of the tree, is it smells like butterscotch.
Yum.
It's crazy. It smells so good. And the first time I started working with it, I was like, it smells like I'm making cookies in here. And I found that the ponderosa pine does, because of the shipbuilding history in Seattle, has been used for pitch and stuff up in the Pacific Northwest for a long time. And it is just really lovely stuff to work with because it smells great, and the ponderosa pines produce a lot of pitch, a lot of resin that comes out. So I render that down and use that. A friend of mine, there are not a whole lot of ponderosa pines in Seattle proper. They're all, up the mountains a ways. And one of my other, a friend of mine that lives in Eastern Washington's like, I've got like 15 of those in my yard. so, so she started sending me from Spokane, all of her tree resins. And so I've been using ponderosa pine ever since. So, so those are the two things that I've been using. And I like the fact that I can, go back to sort of the basics when it comes to working with an ancient kind of casting wax, and make it make a little more sense. So I'm not working with the plastics. I'm not working with the petroleum products, as much as I would, anything else. And as a sculpture wax, it's really nice. It's a really soft sculpture wax and works a lot like kind of like brown microcrystalline wax. And one of the things that, while I was working on sort of delving into the recipes and what's what of waxes, that I found out about the microcrystalline wax is that the brown microcrystalline wax is actually it's the cream that comes off of the milk that is crude oil. So it basically is when they're taking the crude oil to make other products in petroleum, that brown goo turns into microcrystalline wax. So I was like, oh, that's really gross. so, um, so I really kind of like the fact that, I've got something that I can work with that is, um, one, not gonna, be bad for me or all of the rest of the environment. But it's a wonderful, lovely wax to work with. And it's a little bit addictive because, like you said, Susan, it's like, when you're pulling your bubble gum as a kid, it's got that kind of, wonderful stretchability to it. But I've got some examples. Do you want to see?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I'll change my camera over here. Here we go. Boopity boop, boop, boop. Hello. Susan, can you spotlight?
I don't know. Let me look. I forgot to, how's that?
There you go. Very nice. So, one of the ones that I just did recently is this little guy, and just a little charm, which is really kind of fun to work on a teeny tiny little scale with the Mitsuro, because it does have, this really wonderful, oops, hello, wonderful sort of organic nature to it, which I love. Um, but I've been working with it a long time. This is one of my first actual rings in Mitsuru. This is 18 karat gold, and a recipe that I was doing a very long time ago. But I really love working with it and sort of playing with it, and you can see the sort of almost grass-like organic texture that it has. Um, and it can be used for everything from, earrings to little charms to um, you know, everything that you're going to make in jewelry. And what I'll do sometimes is cast my originals, clean them up, and then I can make a mold with them and cast for my production line. Um, the nice thing about these is that you can do a lot of very lightweight stuff with it and really control, kind of what you're doing. It takes a little bit of practice to play with it, but I love being able to do stuff like, stretch and pull and play to get, just a really beautiful, almost, windswept, kind of, oh gosh, satiny material, silky material, sort of blowing in the wind. Um, but it can be really simple too. It doesn't have to be, too terribly elaborate. So it can be just a really subtle sort of, texture, like hair or something. Um, there we go. And I do like adding on to that different things with my models. So sometimes I'm, combining stone setting techniques or wax techniques to be able to, add different elements to the pieces. Um, so this was actually added in metal afterwards, so I could set my pearl. But you can also do all kinds of stone settings for wax that are like this one actually was done afterwards too, just soldering on a lovely little fat jump ring to create a bezel. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing with that. Um, let's see, let me show you some examples here of what I've got on the bench. So, oops, come back here. Well, so much for the gold ring. There it goes. All right. All right, everybody. Work with me here. So here we go. Lots of stuff. So some of the pieces that I've got on the bench right now are uh, pieces that were just recently cast. And I've got, some different varying weights and thicknesses. I like being able to, let me get that focused a little bit better for you there. There we go. I like being able to do a little more sculptural work with it and build things up. So I can actually even, create prong settings or very specific shapes with the Mitsuru instead of just pulling it um, to create kind of a grassy texture. I can actually, form it and play with it to create, really sculptural elements as well. So one of the things that I really like to do, whether I'm doing something that's, kind of delicate, a nice delicate thin band or something that's a little more chunky, it's kind of fun. So yeah, you can see those have like a really nice kind of folded, pulled texture that I like to work with. But it can be very fluid and very, um, yeah, very fluid and very organic. But you can also do stuff that's a little more specific, just depending on what you're doing. I really kind of like taking, the smaller pieces and making really fun things with them that are elements of, another design, possibly, another necklace or an earring, and kind of building things up and moving on. Kind of taking something that's uh, a nice little stretched out piece of wax and swirling it around to create some really fun stuff. So the wax itself, once I kind of melt it all together and get it all nice and gooey, I usually pour it into a little mold, and I'll bring some of this with me when I come to Atlanta, Susan, so
Okay.
that if you guys want to pick some up, then you can. But I think Chris Anderson was going to join us tonight too. He's around someplace. And Chris actually sells the Mitsuru through Lion Punch Forge. So if you are wanting to get some of the Mitsuru already made, it usually comes in a uh, nice little package like that. It's the Golden Kitsune wax. Um,
Is
and
that do you make it at your house?
yeah, I make it at my studio. Yeah. So
Oh,
it's yeah, a golden kitsune. So I actually make this in small batches here at the studio. And so it's got kind of the tradition and how to work with it. But I do have some of this that I'll bring with me too. So so this, when I'm working with it, I usually have either a lamp or something like a warming table or like a coffee warmer that I can kind of warm stuff up with. And with warmer weather, this will soften up a little more easily. But when it's chilly, you might need to have something like a little coffee warmer or something that you can kind of, get it warmed up with, or even warm your hands up with it. Um, and it takes a minute to kind of get it loosened up and warm. Um, but this is kind of one of those things that's like getting, like you were saying, bubble gum. For me, it's like Laffy Taffy.
Yeah, my favorite.
Uh, yeah, oh gosh, what are they called? Starburst.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
it's like the taffy, right?
Mhm.
And this is actually called taffy wax because
Oh,
it does produce, those kinds of really long, beautiful textures that you would see, with taffy, right? And it's the folding and pulling of this that produces those really lovely folds. So usually I'm kind of warming it up with something like that. And then once I can kind of, oh, there we go. That did it really well. So I just kind of get it all warmed up in my hands, and it's so satisfying to get it to a point where I can just kind of pull it and shape it. Yeah, it's good hand yoga.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, being able to kind of, stretch it all out, and you can see, what kind of, finesse you can start to get with it right away. And it's really subtle when you start to pull it, kind of like toffee ugh, or taffy. Um, but as it warms up, you start getting those folds, right? As it just layers upon layer. Um, I usually have around some mandrels. Uh, the mandrels that I'm usually working with, sometimes I'll cover them in like parchment paper so that the wax doesn't stick to them. And I can shape and mold this stuff really beautifully around the mandrels and get the size that I need. Ooh, there we go. Yay. And let's see, we get a little bit better. There we go. A little bit better view of that. So yes, I start to kind of push and pull that. There we go. You can start to see that sinewy layer start to form. And just pulling and pulling and pulling, I'll get some really lovely texture. So yeah, so I'll just kind of work with that. It's nice to kind of get a little bit bigger chunk to play with. Not that you always need that much to get, the longer folds and lines, but when you're really trying to get that really beautiful sort of satin finish that this can give you, um, it's nice to have a little bit bigger piece that you can work with. And then doing something like, whoop,
Oh,
boop, and cut out little sections. And that gives you this, really nice little fluid shape that you can play with texture. Um, so yeah, so I'll just play with it and work with it. And even if you feel like you have worked with it to a point where you're like, ugh, it's not doing its thing anymore. I don't like it. It looks awful. I've, stretched it and it's stopped behaving the way that I want it to, or it's got too much air in it or whatever. It's completely recyclable. So you can, throw it into a little pot and melt it back down again and start all over with it. So it's really kind of awesome for that. Um, so the only time you really kind of lose any of it is if in the casting process, when it burns out. So there's always a little bit of extra. There's always a little bit of material to play with. And so as I'm, kind of putting these things together, like so, I can make all kinds of little rings and flippy doos and play with it in wonderful ways. Now, I'm playing with this almost, right. I'm playing with it really regularly. So I kind of know what it feels like and how to work with it. Um, and it's really fun to be able to, get to start and see, what these wonderful shapes can do and how much it can take and stretch and play. And I'm kind of looking and seeing what's possible with this, wonderful material. But
Jennifer, I have a question. Do different formulas lead to different kinds of striations?
absolutely. Well, there's all kinds of things that can affect that. If you want to unhighlight me, I can come back over here and
Oh, you know what?
yeah.
I have to find out how.
There you go. Yeah, so there's a lot of things. As I was saying, Susan Zeiss, who was doing this for years, Susan's kind of retiring at this point, and she's lovely. I love her, and her work is beautiful. Her formula is very different than mine, and is done with like McLaughlin waxes, and so it's really different. It's much stiffer. And some people have found, all kinds of recipes that work for them for what they're doing. Um, and depending on, how much wax you're working with, how many folds you're used to doing, how you're handling the wax, all of those things can affect what the striations look like and how big a fold you're getting. Um, but, I like if I'm gonna have my hands in it a lot, and one of the things that I like about this specific wax is that sometimes when you're working with it, it's just like you wanna kinda lick your fingers a little bit and kinda play with it, and I don't have to worry about it, because it's beeswax and yummy stuff. So, so I know that it's food safe, and I know that I can work with it. And with most petroleum waxes, that's true too. But it is petroleum. So you always want to be a little bit careful with that stuff, what you're exposing yourself to and inhaling and all that stuff. So with this, I love that it is the traditional real recipe. It's not like, you know, using processed waxes or even processed beeswax. And I just, the more, like I said, I dove into sort of the research and the recipe on this and tried a million different recipes and methods of making it. Um, I found that because I was using some of the beeswax I was ordering, I was like, beeswax, just order some from Amazon. And that works. But like I said, it sort of has a funny feel and smell to it to me, especially compared to the stuff I'm getting now. And as I started researching and I realized that a lot of that comes from China, and the bees they're using aren't they aren't free range bees. They are a lot of times in a greenhouse sort of situation, and they're using sugar water. They're not using flowers to produce the honey and the beeswax. So it has a different smell to it, and a lot of times there are pesticides as well as hormones and stuff that can be in antibiotics and stuff that can be in the mix with that I was like I don't want that. Um so yeah, so I'm really happy with this particular mix because of those reasons. Um and like I said, a lot of the stuff that can really change the recipe can be things that where you are in the world, what kind of resins and bees are near you, and using local stuff. The climate definitely can make a difference because if you're in a place that's really hot, you may want to have a recipe that has or add a little bit to the recipe of more resin to make it a little bit stiffer. Or if you're, working in a colder temp, you might want to work with something that has a little more beeswax in it. So yeah, there's this has been fudged with and adapted around the world for millennia. um a very similar recipe was used in South America for pre-Columbian uh casting, so their sculpture wax was very similar as well to
Oh,
the earliest known castings from Mesopotamia and what's now Pakistan. So you've got, these same materials that have been used for literally 6,000 years, have been like kind of like, well, we need it to be stickier, we'll use more resin, or we need it to be softer, we'll use more beeswax. So yeah, it's really kind of fascinating, I think.
yeah. Oh, another question too. So when you're stretching and making, is it possible to stretch it too thin that it won't cast well? Or the
Um,
striations too low to cast or?
Oh, the textures will always come out, and no matter
Okay.
how little you, no matter how little you think they are, it will
Okay.
always cast. Um, yeah, and if you've done some wax carving and casting or working with sculpture wax at all, even sensitive wax will pick up fingerprints so easily. So if you're working with like sheet wax or sprue wax or sculpture wax, even just your body heat and temperature can impress the wax. Carving waxes are primarily like almost like a thermoplastic, so they don't pick up that body heat like the other waxes will, but they are so sensitive that dust will scratch them, and that shows up in the cast finished piece. So something like this where you're like pulling it and stretching it and getting those little variations, it all will come out, and trying to get them extremely deep sometimes doesn't work well for a wearable piece like a ring potentially, because it can be a little sharp. So if you get too thin, it can get a little sharp and unwearable. But one of the illusions about working with wax is that it's too thin, because when you measure it and compare it to like a gauge in metal, 1 millimeter is about 18 gauge. And that in wax doesn't seem like anything. It's like, it's like you feel like you're blowing on a dandelion. But that's still, you can get this stuff so thin that you can see through it. I mean, the little pieces that I was working with, I mean, you can see through it, because it is, beeswax, and it does have some translucency to it. So it seems really, really thin. In reality, let's see how thick this piece is. Well, let's just find out, shall we? So this piece is about almost 1 millimeter thick. And it seems like nothing. I mean, it really does seem like, if that was a potato chip, I'd feel gypped kind of thin. So yeah, it really is remarkable how thin you can go with if you're wax carving or if you're sculpting. Most waxes you can take down to about 0.5 millimeter, and they'll still cast really well. And even sharper details, on edges and rims, like I mean, prongs can be really small, and those will still cast well. So all those little details, and I have to stop playing with it. Oh my God. All those little details will come out in the metal, and they look, not only are they 10.4 times heavier in metal than they are in wax if you're casting sterling, but um all those little details are like 10 times more obvious. You can see every little scratch, and I can see some of you like nodding your heads. Every little scratch, every little fingerprint, every little, wait a minute, that file mark, was that there in the wax? It was. And trying to get that stuff as smooth and polished as you possibly can in the wax and making it look great. You're working with this and it's like whoop, and that stuff will show up. Absolutely. Yeah. That more than answer your question, Donna?
Yes. Can you polish Mitsuro wax?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Because I mean, not the wax itself. You can polish the finished piece, right?
Right. But you can't like
Yeah.
smooth the wax before you cast it or.
You can kind of do a little bit of like a heat polish on it.
Mhm,
But it has such a low melting temperature
mhm.
that you have to be very careful about that.
Okay.
But it's in metal, it's really easy, of course, to polish it all up and to change some things if you need to, because it's metal. And what you can do is combine this with other waxes. So just like you can combine, wax wire with carving wax or sculpture wax,
Hmm.
you can work Mitsuru in with, like if you have a base potentially that is sheet wax or a carved ring, and you just want to do like a little whipped cream on top, kind of
Mhm.
situation with the Mitsuru. Yeah, you can totally add the Mitsuru to your other waxes, just like working with any of your waxes, they're combinable. So yes, you can polish those and then add that,
Okay.
to get different textures.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi. Can you cast stones with this in place with this wax?
Yeah, you can cast stones in place with any of the waxes. The issue isn't the wax that you're working with. The issue is the stones that you're working with. And when you're casting stones in place, there are very specific parameters that you have to work with. You know, you have to be working with stones that are appropriate to be exposed to that kind of heat and temperature shifts. So, you know, working with stones that are capable of withstanding heat and thermal shock become really important. So you can't work with stones that are going to change color necessarily. I've had people that have used diamonds and they haven't worked. So sometimes diamonds are drilled and filled with certain kinds of epoxies or stones that have gone through, you know, heat treatments. Even sapphires go through that kind of stuff. So some stones go through, you know, irradiation and heat treatment, and that can totally affect the stone in a kiln. So it really isn't so much about the wax with the casting in place. It has everything to do with the stone and the kiln control. So you got to know your kiln programs. Sometimes you can add stuff to the investment that helps. Um, Sometimes you can what we would do, you know, when we're casting stones in place is, you know, we cast them and we put them back in the kiln and let them come down with the kiln. So it's almost like tempering glass. You do the same thing when you're annealing glass. And I've had people cast glass in place. I've had people like working with borosilicate glass, casting that in place. Stuff that you wouldn't think that you could cast in place. You can. Things like, you know, porcelain and yeah, different things can actually be cast in place. But it's a matter of sort of figuring out the puzzle of what it is and how it's going to work and how you're going to approach it. So there's a lot to casting stones in place, but um, the nice thing about wax is you can create stone settings that you could never do in metal, right? Fabrication. So being able to do things like, you know, set, you know, a little sapphire in the twinkling eye of a bunny, have it wink at you. You know, you can do with wax, but that would be, you know, incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to do with, you know, milled metal. So, yeah, there's, you know, just amazing possibilities with stone setting and wax. But yeah, stone setting, casting wax or casting stones in place is can be very experimental and is used a lot in the jewelry industry for especially like really small accent stones, like really small diamonds and CZs, because
Yeah.
those can take the heat. Um, they are usually easily replaceable if they come out broken. But it just is about in the industry, it's about saving time and doing the cheap stuff in the wax. And sometimes they'll like put them all in the mold and then inject the wax and then cast them. So they can do, you know, CZs of a couple of different colors and, you know, really easily that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Quiz me. I love that. Yay. So everybody's sipping and sawing, I'm guessing, right?
Can you weave with it? I'm sure you've tried it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. The wax, once you get it really warm, is a little bit tacky. But once it sort of cools down a little bit, you can totally, it's not as tacky, but it wants to bond to itself pretty easily when it's warm. So you don't have to use a whole lot of sticky wax or heat to make sure things are really, you know, kind of tacked together when you're working with it as as a fiber, you know, wax is fiber. And so it can be, you know, braided and woven. being delicate with it or working on a warm surface, you can kind of, get things to move around, make some long strings with it. And yeah, oh, absolutely. That'd be really fun. Yes.
So will we need for the in-studio workshop lots of little warming things, or is there, can you use candles, or can you use?
Yeah, absolutely. Some people will use tea lights. Some people will use alcohol lamps. Um, some people will use like little coffee warmers or little wax warmers, like I've got. Like that one's is one designed for using sticky wax in, then
Oh,
screwing up trees. So, but the coffee warmer with a little, I have like a little metal measuring cup that works really well. What else?
Would you be offering this workshop online?
Yes. Actually, that's a good question for Susan, how that's going to work. But I think you had said there's what, 30 days after the workshop?
yeah, so we teach it at the same time, so it's a hybrid offering. So Jen will be in our studio. We have a videography team, and we'll be filming. Our cameras are really good. We'll be filming her, and at the end of each night, you'll receive a copy of that day. And at the end of the third day, which is the final day of this class, you'll receive all 3 days. You can keep those for 30 days. Typically, if someone needs a little bit more time, they can just get in touch with Jen. And if she says it's okay, we can extend that. But we try to protect your work, Jen. Jen has her own business. She teaches all over the place. And so, um, you know, we can't let it be forever, but hopefully it'll be enough time for you to be able to watch it and get in your muscle memory. And I don't know if you provide handouts or.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So yeah.
Somebody said that everybody was muted. Can you not unmute yourselves? It looks to me like you can. If you have a question, just touch your little microphone and unmute yourself.
Oh,
Some
I,
people
I
can,
can unmute myself. I'm just the woman asked, and it looks like she
Okay.
left the session here.
Maybe.
She said it's quiet in here, leaving unless I hear someone talking.
No. That's a software package that we have. That's a note take.
Oh,
That's an,
okay.
but there is a person that said we're all muted.
That
But
was me. I just was responding to
oh,
oh,
I'm sorry.
that
Oh,
woman saying that's why you don't hear anybody talking because we've muted ourselves.
oh no, that's just a note taker. For some reason, it doesn't pay attention.
Okay.
Yeah.
AI, who knew? Sorry.
Oh, it's on there, and I don't know how to turn it off. Somebody put it on there.
Um, regarding again the online videos, what if you have difficulties or questions? Um, do you get a session with Jennifer or
So
is it done at the same time so we can
no,
interact?
it is all at the same time. So
Oh,
what we
good.
do, since we'll be in the studio, we are very quiet so that everybody online can hear. And we try to bring everybody into the same room. So you'll be able to see all of us. And we have a big, it looks like a TV screen, only it's a computer screen that we can see you. And while people are in the studio working, we'll have Jen go spend one-on-one time with people in the online group. So it's very personal. The beauty of working from home is that you can make as much noise as you want as long as your screen is muted. So, maybe we stretch quietly while Jen's teaching, but
cat,
it's
your dog's barking,
yeah, we've been doing it virtually for a couple of years now, and people usually give us really good feedback.
Yeah.
We occasionally we have a thing where we have to have somebody log off and come back on, but we have a team of people in the studio who are dedicated to taking care of you. And
Yeah, and if you have any questions for me, I mean, as far as like follow up, you can always email me. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm happy to answer those questions. one of the things I know that you all have like open studio at MAG, and the company that I have, Little Metal Foxes, we have open studios Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and it's virtual. So we have a lot of people that pop in and, you know, ask questions and get one-on-one, and it's yeah, it's a good support group. We love it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's been really good. We uh yeah, it's like a month-long thing, and you can pop in, you know, ask questions, pop out, you know, and you may make it. The thing that ended up happening is that we had a lot of people that wanted like one-on-one office hours or mentoring. And it was so hard to like coordinate everybody's schedule and figure out when people could do that. And it was expensive, you know, to do one-on-one. And we found this way that we could do have set hours, you know,
Mhm.
and working with me or Julia or Helen. And a lot of the people that are in the class, it's kind of like crowdsourcing because
Mhm.
everybody has great answers and has done workshops all over the country. And Valerie Connerway, who's, you know, usually she is in Atlanta and a big supporter there, is one of my favorite people in the whole world.
Mhm.
And it's really kind of great because you've got people like her that are in our open studios, and Annie, who's up in Chicago, and a couple of other people that are all over, and they have been taking, you know, multiple workshops. And so we have people pop in and, you know, ask questions about what we're doing, and you know, getting feedback. It's like, you know, I've done this horrible thing. Now what? So there's that. And, you know, just questions about, you know, the business and about, you know, small businesses and how you're doing it. And right now we've got a bunch of people that are in there that wanted to do some drawing, and none of them, they didn't go to art college. And so I've been teaching, you know, college art for, you know, years and years, and drawing in particular. And so we started doing drawing one. And so some of the people in the class are doing like drawing one assignments as we're going along in open studio, which has been really fun. So, but
I
stuff
love-
like that, you know, where you can kind of, you know, get feedback and, you know, email me and, you know, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm always open to that.
And then during the workshops, if you have questions, again, you just unmute yourself and ask questions. If the instructor needs it to be quiet for some reason, then we'll have the questions come through chat, and we'll just interrupt when it's the best time to interrupt and ask Jennifer to explain what she's doing and answer your questions. And those questions are really important because they're good questions for everybody. And
Absolutely.
we will follow ourselves around in the studio with microphones, or we will repeat the question so that everybody at home can hear the questions of the people in the workshop. So similar to the open studio thing that Jennifer was just describing, we teach each other also.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's, you know, with any group workshop, you've got people coming in that are at all different levels. And it's a great opportunity to learn exponentially because you can learn through, you know, you're not going to be able to do everything all the time in every workshop, but somebody else might be experimenting with something else that you didn't have a chance to do or you didn't even think of doing. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of see what they're doing and, you know, go, what, wait, what's that? You know? Or, you know, wait, where have I gone? Where did I go wrong? How did that happen? And what do I do to fix it? You know, those are always
For
great.
this workshop, people don't need any metalsmithing experience, right? They can do the
Yeah,
wax without it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was telling you earlier, I mean, when I first started doing metals and jewelry, I was coming from photography and printmaking. And when I got to grad school, I had already started doing these mixed media sculptures and was like, I need to know how to cast these parts that I'm doing. And so I was working with the instructor in the jewelry studio and figure she helped me get through the casting part of it. So I actually learned how to cast before I learned any metalsmithing techniques. I had no idea. I was like, how do I get this part off the bottom? And she was like, well, that's a sprue. You do need to know how to saw and file. And I'm like, oh, okay. What's a file? So what this jeweler saw is way too small. So but you know, learning those techniques and being able to deal with the metal part after it's cast is really important. But there are a lot of people, that are at all different levels that only work in wax, are amazing wax model makers that never touch the metal until it's, wrapped up, stone set in a box, delivered back to them. So, there are a lot of people that are just wax model people that don't do the casting. They specialize in that. And yeah, it's great.
So I've never done anything with wax. So what you were just saying, I mean, if I wanted to do something like this and I'd have to take it online because I'd probably miss a day of it because of some travel. But if I don't have any casting stuff, like what do you do? Do you send it somewhere and somebody else like tell me
Absolutely.
more?
Great question. There are a lot of things you can do. One option is if you have a place like MAG that you can go to and visit and do some casting there. That's always a great way to do it. So if you need to do something every now and then, sometimes you can do studio rental time at different locations. So that's one option. Another option is, and this is usually what most wax makers will do, because having a casting setup a lot of times can be extremely expensive. And getting like a centrifuge and a kiln and the ventilation and big torches and all that stuff. That's usually for bigger casting places or people that are doing it a lot more. So if you've got somebody who is either like an independent jeweler who's doing their own casting, sometimes you can ask them if they would cast it for you for a fee. And there's, just check around and see who, like, friend local jeweler people. If you've got a guild, around, see who's doing that in their own studio and see if you can, maybe hang out with them, trade them for something, or, buy them coffee, a bottle of wine or whatever, and show up and be like, help me. So there are a lot of people that really like to share that information. The other option is going to a professional caster, and there are a lot of casting houses around the country that you can go to. They're located all over the place. And finding a caster sometimes can be a little bit like dating online. You just have to kind of be like, are they for me? And kind of, send them a couple of sample pieces, maybe before you send them anything that you're like, really your heart is invested in, but send them a couple of sample pieces, maybe to a couple of different casters. And that way you can see, what they're going to charge you, how much, it's going to cost for them to do certain things. Um, and, because a lot of people will charge you for a flask and, the metal, of course, that you're casting in. Sometimes there'll be a sprue charge that, either putting it on or taking it off. And then they'll charge you based on what you're adding on. So you might have like a clip and grind after it's come out in the metal. If you're doing like a polish, so they can like tumble and finish it. So they can take it up to different levels, but each one of those is kind of like a la carte, and you can have them take it up to where you want. The cheapest way to go is usually to have them cast and clip it and send it back to you. So it comes back looking like it did for a lot of people, just right out of the investment. So there's some cleanup for it. It takes a little bit of work. It doesn't look, like the sparkling thing you might imagine. But you can have them take it up to that level. And sometimes it's worth a couple of extra bucks to have them do that so that you don't have to get your hands in material that you don't want to, have in your studio, or just get it to a place where you can work on it, and set some stones or whatever you're going to do. And the thing I can tell you as someone who has cast professionally for like that in a casting house, the one thing that I will warn you all not to ever do is email or call them and ask them how much it costs to cast something, because that can be anything. It's like, do you need me to cast a car engine or a platinum ring? What are we talking about? So anytime you contact a professional casting house, make sure you tell them what the wax weight is, what kind of metal you want to cast in. A lot of times it's a good idea to say, I've got some green carving wax. It weighs this much. I want it cast in, sterling silver or 18 karat gold or whatever you want. And then they can give you an estimate, right? So if you're not giving them any information, they're not going to be able to tell you um, what it cost to cast, right? Because like I said, some places will charge you for a flask fee or a casting fee. Some places do them individually so that yours is in a flask all by itself. Some places do it where it's in a flask with a whole bunch of other things that they're casting that day. So it just kind of depends, how what their process is in their studio, how they're charging you for that. So it's kind of a good idea to ask them, some fairly educated questions, have kind of like a checklist that you're going in going, this is what I've got. Ask them what their turnaround time is. Um, you know, and do they have a flask fee, or how do they set up their casting? Do they do them individually, or do they do like a big sprue tree? And they're kind of like, oh yeah, we throw it in with everybody. And you're like, okay, great, that's fine. Because it brings the cost down and it makes it easier for them usually too. So
Okay, thanks.
is that too much information there, Emily? Was that
No, it's good. That's good.
I've been doing this a long time, so it's like, if I had captors, I'm sure they'd throw me out a window because I'd be like, tool tips, let's talk casting.
Any other?
Oh. Yeah. So who signed up already?
Um, Anybody in this call?
No one. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing all of you.
Well, I was gonna ask when is it again? Because I just got back from traveling and I haven't looked up on the website. But I was like, I'm gonna make it to this Zoom. So when is the class?
I have to look at the dates. Jen, do you know?
It's the last weekend of January.
Okay.
So it'll be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right?
Mhm.
I'm looking right now. If you go to metalartsguildga.org, and I will tell you in 1 second.
And we will be doing the first day, Friday, we're going to be doing an introduction to the wax. I'm going to show you how to make it from scratch if you want to, and how to adapt it to make it stiffer or softer and sort of play with the recipe a little bit. Here's my studio assistant. There he goes. Very shy. So the first day we're going to be working with the wax and sort of experimenting and playing with it. The second day will be maybe making some models and getting it invested so we can cast it on the third day, do cleanup. And there are some polishing tips that I can show you. So we'll be doing the casting on the third day.
And then all of the polishing and all that is just done at your house or whatever. You just take the piece with you.
No, we'll be doing
Okay.
that on
Oh, do it there.
enough time. Yeah, on
Okay.
the
Cool.
third day. So we'll be
Okay.
doing like the casting and finishing on the third day.
Okay, very cool.
But I mean, some of you, if you don't get that done, yeah, take it home.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
For those of you that live in Atlanta, you can always come back either during open studio, or you can take Wednesdays. Dallas teaches a casting class. On Fridays, there's a class where you can cast. So you
Yeah, outside of this really quick, I was just gonna ask with the class for casting, that's the 8-week course, correct? Okay. Gotcha. And is that's just through the month of January through February, right?
it's we repeat that class every single time. So
Nice.
there are
Okay.
people that are in their first class, and then there are people that have been doing it forever.
Okay.
Sometimes on Friday there's an advanced studio, so it's a guided studio. Some people are, casting
Okay.
instrument parts, and some people are
Oh, wow.
doing something totally unrelated that they want some guidance with that has nothing to do with casting. People are teaching themselves to do Mitsuro. So
Very cool. Okay.
And I'll tell you too, with this stuff, a lot as well as with other waxes when you're working, the wonderful thing about wax is it is not expensive to work with. So if you've got some carving wax, some wax wire, some sticky wax, some different materials like that you're working with, Mitsuru is not expensive to make. I take that back. It can get expensive to make. But there are lots of options, and the cool thing is that when you're learning to carve wax and you're learning to work with wax, you're not going to want to cast everything you make. you know. One of the classes that I had in wax with my students at SCAD was that, you know, I'd have them as one of their early projects, taking the wax and going through certain steps. And by the end, they would have nothing left,
Mhm.
just so that you would get used to working with the tools and the materials and what the wax felt like, because it's a completely different material than working with metal. And so if you're working with, you know, files and saws in metal, wax isn't going to always respond the same way. You can't work with, you know, saws and files on sheet wax and wax wire. You can't polish those, but you can polish the carving waxes, you know. So it's important to sort of, you know, just really, I can't even stress how important it is to play with wax when you're first learning and dive in fearlessly, because you really want to investigate the material, see what it will do. You know, it's, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make early is like carving this perfect thing and taking forever on this one thing. And then there's, as Donna nods, she's like, yep. And then you get to a point and you're like, you're afraid. I had one gal that took, I don't know how many classes with me. She was scared to death to cast the piece because she had put, you know, 80 hours, 120 hours into that piece just carving it. And she ended up taking it to a professional caster to do it because she was so afraid to cast it. And it was just like, you know, so it's really a good idea to, you know, really experiment and play, to have, you know, the first few pieces, especially that you cast, it's usually a good idea to just sort of go, okay, I'm just going to do this thing, see what happens. Let's see what happens. And so that way you get an idea of, you know, what the wax weighs and how it's going to come out in metal, because it is a transformation. And sometimes that transformation for some people is really unexpected. So it's one of the beautiful things about it. And for some people it's just like, "Arr," you know. But it's important to know, I think, what is what's possible with it, because there are so many things that are possible with wax that are not possible in milled metal, and vice versa. It's like I would never make a simple like stack ring with a bezel set out of like wax when I could do it in a few minutes in metal, right? So there's certain things that just, you know, the wax does a lot better, and certain things that milled material does better. And to use it to that benefit is really lovely, you know, to really understand what that material can do. So I'm excited about the Mitsuro class, you guys.
I am too. Thank you so much.
I love teaching casting. I love it.
So can people, if they have questions for you, do you want them to go through us? Do you want them to ask you directly? What's best for you, Jennifer?
Between now and then or afterwards?
If they have questions specifically about this class coming up, this workshop coming up, it's the 24th, 25th, 26th of January.
Yeah, if you want to funnel that until then, that's fine. And then after that, they can, you know, email me directly. So if you have like, you know, a bunch of questions coming in, just, you know, you can consolidate and send them to me. Yeah, so we can do that. Absolutely. And I will be bringing some of the Mitsuru with me. So I'll have some at the workshop as well. And otherwise, again, Chris Anderson is at Lion Punch Forge, and he sells the wax. So you can get it from him too. So before
If you're taking this class from home, make sure you get the wax ahead of time.
yeah.
Okay.
Lori, your tree is beautiful, by the way. You're showing the spirit of the season right there. Looks good.
Okay. So you can get in touch with me, Susan, through it's Susan at metalartsguildga.org. And if you guys want to write this down, you can call me if you need it, 404-325-4584. Or text, just tell me who you are. And we would love to have you join us. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's definitely not something anyone's ever taught for us before.
Yeah.
We love
And
our first time.
fun.
Yeah. And Jennifer gets-
I grew up in Atlanta too, by the way. So I'm going to be visiting my family while I'm down there. So it'll be a lot of fun.
So we'd love to see you. I think we have room for 5 more people in the studio. We could push that to 6 or 7 if we had to. And then when you learn how to do this and you're sitting around and you're not in the studio and you don't want to get all dirty, you can play with wax.
Yes. And, you know, that's one of the other great things about wax is that, you know, if you are working with it at home, I mean, it's, you know, it's not a health risk to you and your furry friends, you know, it's,
Don't need to wear a mask.
well,
Respirator.
you might want to just because it's dusty, but I mean, as far as like, you know, little fluffs about, but it's, yeah, I mean, you can, you know, work with it and you know, my dog has eaten it and yeah, I mean, you know, comes
Okay.
out like a Twizzler. It's kind of an unflavored Twizzler. You know?
Okay. Thank you so much. I hope this
Absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure.
enjoyable time for you. And then I wanted to introduce Mindy before we close. Mindy is our new executive consultant for mental health, and Mindy waved so everyone knows who you are. Mindy's been rescuing arts organizations and making good things even better for as long as Jennifer's been playing with wax.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm good, Mindy. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Oh, I remember we had a great conversation at Snag in Chicago. I think that's
Yes.
where it's a while ago, but
Yeah. Well, that's when I was doing the research at the Field Museum.
mhm.
The last time I got out of the house. But yeah, no, Julia and I were, we went to the Field Museum and we're doing the research on the earliest casting stuff from Mesopotamia because they have it at the Field Museum. So that was
That's so
fun.
interesting. I look forward to that book whenever.
Yeah,
It would be,
Yeah.
I'm working.
All right, guys, we're gonna sign off here. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Later.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.